Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new malicious compliance stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
First one is titled, "So you will close my account if I don't agree to pay higher interest rates." Okay. So this was back during the 2008 government mortgage crisis. Had great credit, a great job, and multiple credit cards I used to manage the different properties I owned, a personal card, gas cards, etc. So one day I get a letter from a credit card company that rhymes with Apital Pank saying that they unilaterally were raising my rates from 13.99% annually to 27% annually. If I wanted to keep my card, something many people during the crisis needed to do to survive, I had to agree to the new rate, otherwise they would close my account, I would not be able to make any more charges on the card, and I would have to continue making monthly payments at my current interest rate until the card was paid off. Of course, I had done nothing wrong credit-wise to deserve this treatment from my credit card company, almost doubling of my interest rate, so I called their service line. After being on hold for over 2 hours, I finally got to speak to a CSR, and after not getting anywhere with her, I had to hold for another 30 minutes to talk to her supervisor. I was basically told, very rudely, that I could either accept the new rate or chose to close my account. Those were my only two options. Incensed, I said, "Fine, close it," and they did. What they didn't know was that a week prior I had transferred all the balances from my other cards, over $22,000, to their card without paying a transfer fee and at a promotional rate of 1.9% for 1 year. But because of the law at the time, they could only charge me at a rate of 1.9% until the loan was paid. Here's the malicious compliance part. So here I am 13 years later paying the absolute minimum payment I am required to make each month, never missing a payment and never paying late, otherwise their default rate of 27% would kick in. Since the inflation rate during these years has been well over the 1.9% interest I pay, it's like free money. I paid off every other creditor I had with the money I saved and don't even use credit cards anymore, as I've been able to save enough to live on a cash-only basis. They've tried multiple times to get me reactivate the card or to transfer the balance to another super-duper account with lots of benefits for me, like paying a much higher interest rate, without success. The only thing I lament is that all good things must come to an end, as my balance is now down to $1,000 or less, but at least it will last another couple of years. P.S. Young folks, I lucked out, I would have been up a creek otherwise. If you don't have credit card debt now, strive to not ever get one. Next one is titled, "Want to write me a bad performance report?" This happened more than a decade ago, while I was still in the US Army. As a sergeant, you would get an annual performance report written by your supervisor, and that was a big part of you getting promoted or not. This was your NCOER, Non-Commissioned Officer Evaluation Report. My direct supervisor, we'll call him SSG, Staff Sergeant Douche, did not like Sergeant LSCRX at all. He was constantly up our first sergeant's butt while I was looking after the lower enlisted in our section, trying to do what was best for them, even if it didn't make me look good. SSG Douche wasn't very good at the administrative side of his job, or any other side in my opinion, and one evening I get an email from him stating something along the lines of, "Here's your NCOER, sign it and send it back." So I read it and almost sprained my eyeballs, I'm rolling them so hard. It is the worst NCOER I've ever read, much less received. He was really taking a lot of liberties, and in my opinion was not doing himself any favors by writing such bad stuff about my performance, him being my direct supervisor and all. Well, there's a section of the NCOER where he was supposed to write the dates that he had formally counseled me about my performance throughout the year. Those counselings should support the performance he is writing about in the NCOER, except he had never formally counseled me on anything. That would involve paperwork, and him doing his job correctly. But oddly enough, there were dates filled in for several quarterly counselings that he supposedly had done with me. Cue malicious compliance. I emailed him back, requesting that he send me copies of the quarterly counselings that he referenced in the NCOER, so that I could better address my shortcomings that he had so clearly spelled out in the NCOER. He very quickly responded that he didn't have copies, but my NCOER was due in the morning, so I needed to just sign it and send it back to him so that it wouldn't be late. I told him I would be happy to make some corrections that I felt better represented my performance, send it to him for review, and then sign it so that he wouldn't have to turn it in late to our first sergeant. Otherwise I would have to wait for him to come up with the quarterly counselings for me to look over before I'd feel comfortable signing. Now he knew that he hadn't done the quarterly counselings, and even if he faked a few with dates that matched the NCOER, they wouldn't have my signature on them, and there wasn't a chance in hell that I would sign a negative counselling with a fake date on it. So he was stuck, either admit to First Sergeant that he hadn't done his job all year but wanted me to sign off on a bad NCOER, or let me write my own NCOER and force him to sign off on it. Guess who has 2 thumbs and had a glowing NCOER? Next one is titled, I don't care what you have to do, just get it all done, your bonuses are on the line, sweet overtime pay. This happened several months before I left my last job. The company I was working for went through something of a restructuring. The old owner and boss retired and handed the company to his youngest son, who in turn forced a lot of the great people in high positions out and replaced them with his underqualified friends. I was a team lead engineer in the safety and compliance department. I had a team of 3 senior engineers and their juniors, plus a personal secretary, 2 general secretaries, and an office administrator. One of the people hired to oversee all the engineers of the company was a fresh out of school business student who didn't know the first thing on what we do or how we do it. His mindset was getting more out of us than was actually possible. It was his brilliant idea to downsize the department before there were 2 teams like mine. Instead he moved one team to be on build site and pawned all the extra work on my team. Unfortunately we had already been swamped with the extra work. We were falling behind. The way our contracts were set up, we had our base salary plus end-of-year bonuses based on contract completion, plus any hours worked a week above 44, which was paid overtime at a premium rate. I went to the new department lead and I explained to him that we were swamped and needed a few new people, or we needed another team. Him being the cost-cutting son of a witch he was would hear nothing of it. Instead I was met with a, do what you have to do to get it done, I don't care how much you have to work or your yearly bonuses will be in jeopardy. I tried to explain the situation, that it's just too much work. His bright idea was to print out everything he said in his letterhead, sign it, and leave it at that. I had a nice long conversation with my team and the office administrator pointed out that we had, on company letterhead signed by the boss, a ticket for all the overtime we want. So that's what we did. We gave him exactly what he wanted. We got all the projects done by working 80 hours work weeks for 3 straight months. Let's just say the paychecks were beautiful. It was after the 3-month mark, one guess, someone in HR noticed the huge paychecks everyone in my department was pulling in. My boss and I were called into a meeting with HR and the owner of the company. Well, they tried say I was scamming the company out of money. In those 3 months they paid out almost 2 times more than they would have if they kept the 2 teams as they were. But I had all the information I needed. I kept all the emails and signed documents from the department lead and handed everything over, photocopies. I also put down a copy of everyone's contract, with the bonus part highlighted, where it states paid on a per-contract basis. That year my bonus was 3 times bigger than it normally was. But after that incident I left the company 3 months after it had become a crap working environment. On a side note, when I left the company they had to buy my contract out, but that's a completely different story. I'll tell it sometime. Additionally, all of us who were eligible for the bonus took 1/3 of our bonuses and split it with the support staff. Edit, I forgot to add, in the contracts it was put in every 8 hours over 44 hours we were entitled for a company-paid lunch of $50 per person. Usually we would spend just $50 and get 2 party pizzas, but $300 a day, 3 days a week. Well, let's just say that pizza turned into lobster 3 days a week with lots of leftovers for us to take home. Next one is titled, Mileage versus Hourly Wage. This happened a few years ago. I'm changing some details to protect people I still actually really like. The MC in question wasn't mean-spirited, so I don't intend to burn anyone. My job has me drive a lot, lots of highway driving as I visit different sites and so on. We have some vehicles for just such a purpose, but they're in short supply and high demand, and I always felt like if I was using a van for just me, I was depriving someone else of doing something with 4 or 5 other people, much more efficient, you see. So I didn't feel bad if I took my own vehicle, and claimed the mileage afterwards. When my boss went on a sabbatical, the operations guy was my temporary boss. In a meeting, he showed me the numbers on my mileage claims and how they were higher than before. I pointed out that the other vehicles were being used a lot, so I just took my own car. This was too much money to be paying out when we own vehicles, he said, and told me that he was making an exception to our staff policy about mileage by requiring me to only use a company vehicle for all work appointments. I clarified, did he mean all? Yes, he said, all. Sure, I can do that. I went through and I booked a vehicle for the following 6 months for every appointment I knew I would have scheduled meetings. Then I created a spreadsheet wherein I tracked the mileage I would have claimed, then compared it to a combination of the cost of the company vehicle, plus my hourly rate in my salary if the vehicle was even slightly inconvenient to get. Some explanation here, I live in the south end of my city. My office is right downtown. Some of our locations are south of the city, and some are north of the city. So, for the southern visits, I would leave from my house and go to the location directly. Well, now I was driving to the office, getting a vehicle, driving back past my house to go to the southern locations, then repeating the same in reverse. I tracked all the time I spent in traffic doing this. Oh, and then a sudden meeting arose in the city, but I couldn't get one of the normal cars to use. All that was left was one of our 15-passenger vans. But I can't drive one of those vans as I don't have the right kind of license. So, I had to take one of the seats out to bring it below the threshold of what's legal. And I drove, all alone, in a 15-passenger van, now an 11, to a meeting 12 minutes away. And back. Then replace the seat. It was such a pain. So inconvenient. So very, very costly, if you considered how much time I was wasting that wasn't being used for actual work things. After a few months of this, I took it to my now returned boss and let him know what I'd done, in compliance with the directive of operations guy. According to my math, the company had paid nearly $1,000 more in my salary and time than they would have in mileage, and that was just over a couple of months. This wasn't going to be getting smaller over the years. My boss and operations guy had a chat, and I was able to use my own vehicle once again, though encouraged to use a work vehicle any time I was going north, which made sense, and people who might have otherwise wanted it would have to adjust their own lives to deal with my use of the vehicle. Next one is titled, Want Me to Pay the Final Month on My Phone Account? Here's my card info. I live in Israel, where the credit cards are mostly run and operated by banks rather than independent companies. Because the banks stand to profit from consumer debt and interest charges, they really push people to get credit cards rather than debit cards, and they work with big retailers to prefer credit cards by, for example, putting a surcharge on transactions using debit cards. They do still mostly offer debit cards though, since families often get them for teens as a first step toward financial independence. My wife and I have long struggled over spending and debt and have, for the last several years, managed well by not using credit cards at all. When we came here, it took a bit to convince the bank representative that we really did only want debit cards. Nonetheless, we have them and they work as expected in 99% of situations. One of those situations was for our cell phone contract, which we paid via debit card automatic withdrawal for the last 2 years. A few months back, the company started contacting us to tell us that we hadn't paid. We eventually figured out that their system somehow figured out that our card info was from a debit card rather than a credit card, and they, according to their policy, stopped accepting payment. When we called to sort out the problem and they refused to take our debit card as payment, our response was to change phone carriers. Since we changed carriers, the company has contacted us to pay for the final month's bill. When a representative called me a few weeks ago to ask for payment, I happily provided them my card details and told them they were free to take the payment. After the system refused payment, the representative realized it was because it is a debit card and told me. "I'm sorry, our system can't take debit cards." To which I responded, "I'm not sorry at all. This is a legal form of money. If you can't take my payment, that does not bother me." I think she was surprised and confused because she genuinely responded, "Oh, okay." And we hung up. They haven't gotten back in touch since. Next one is titled, "Do you know who I am?" So a few years ago I used to work for a tech company with a fruit logo as a technician. Part of the job was making appointments and checking people into the Genius Bar. I routinely got put on check-in, which I didn't mind because I was fairly good at de-escalating the angry people who come in for appointments to get their devices fixed and told we have long wait times. The store was only slow when we closed. It was more common for walk-in wait times to be 2+ hours, but if people were nice or genuine, I knew some ways to make the appointment time significantly less. After a while I got talked to my leadership to try to avoid doing that and to move through the line because it affected the amount of in-store wait times and made us look bad, which is fine, I understood that. However, anytime an angry customer came in and threw a hissy fit, super rich area and the never being told no mentality was common, the management folded over and did whatever they asked. A few days later I'm back on check-in and the line is to the door and packed. We have 2 people on check-in and moving quickly but not quick enough. I see a larger dude in a nice suit that walked into the store and right past the obvious line straight to me and starts yelling he has to be seen right now. He tells me he has an issue with his phone that sounds like a simple software bug that we can fix easily, and I tell him, "I'm sorry you're having these issues, but rest assured we can and will get them fixed for you. Unfortunately though, our wait times are extremely long, but if you return to the line and wait, I can either put you in our queue and text you when we're ready, or I can make an appointment for later on today or tomorrow." At this point I notice his face turning red and he looks like he's about to blow. The dude screams at me, "Do you know who I am? Do you know what I do? I am important and I need this phone working now. So find someone to help me." At this point in the day I was already tired and was about 30 minutes late for lunch because the line was so long, and I stayed to help my replacement with the line a bit. I stopped what I was doing and dropped my customer service smile and looked at the dude with the dead-eyed, worn-out retail worker stare and said, "Sir, I have no idea who you are, but if you need help with that, you're in the wrong place. The hospital is about 2 exits down. I suggest you go there. But if you need help with your phone and want to be seen right now, I will do so. If you tell every person you walked past that your time is more valuable than theirs, so you must go first. If they agree, I'll get you taken care of, but if not, get to the end of the line and wait like everyone else." Surprisingly, the dude actually turned to the lady I was helping when he barged in and started to say, "Ma'am, I have," before she just cut him off and said, "No, I told him you heard her. Sorry, please move to the end of the line." I never found out who he was because he stomped like a child and stormed out of the store, throwing the heavy doors open and disappearing from view. After he left, I helped the lady and went to lunch. When I got back, my leadership on the floor told me I should have tried to be more helpful, and I told him I just got talked to for being too helpful, and for the rest of the time I worked there they didn't bring up the issue again. I believe the guy probably sent his secretary or assistant up because that practice in this store was really common. The "Do you know who I am?" phrase became an inside joke between me and some co-workers when we had demanding customers. Last one is titled, "Do your own dishes?" Sure thing. My sophomore year of college was an interesting time. My roommates and I didn't really see eye to eye following an incident very early in the school year, and they often ganged up on me regarding issues in the household, regardless of whether I played a hand in the issue or not. One such issue was the dirty dishes situation. Having lived in dorms the year prior, I had my own very basic dishes for the ramen and soup I lived off of, and was used to hand washing everything. So while my roommates would load everything in the dishwasher and let everything overflow there and in the sink, I would wash my few dishes and towel dry them before returning them to my room. Occasionally I would go on an ADHD-induced cleaning spree and clean all of the dishes, including what had been left in the dishwasher, so it never got so bad that we couldn't at least do crap in the kitchen. One day they called a household meeting. My 2 roommates were eyeing me the entire time as they went over this dish issue, and said from then on, everyone was responsible for their own dishes. Cue malicious compliance. I stopped cleaning their messes. I used my personal microwave that I'd brought in from the dorms. I even stopped using their dishes, except for making macaroni and cheese. Everything continued to pile up. There was often very little counter space in our rather large kitchen, and every time they saw me, they would glare. But I was doing my own dishes, just as they'd asked. It all came to a head on one of the days I decided to make macaroni. I was in the midst of eating my lunch, and had decided I would clean my dishes when I was, done eating. Well, the bitchier of the two roommates came home and saw me casually eating in the living room, and tried to accuse me of not cleaning my fair share of dishes. I looked up at her and flatly said that I would gladly point out exactly which dishes were mine in the kitchen. She seemed to have thought she had won based on the smug look she gave me. Bowl in hand, one walked her to the kitchen and pointed out the pot, wooden spoon, and colander I had used to make my lunch, then motioned to my half-filled bowl and said that I'd just made myself food. I asked her as innocently as I could manage if I should have washed what I had cooked with before sitting down to enjoy my food in the living room. She honestly looked ready to blow a gasket. Through gritted teeth she told me that no, that wasn't expected of me. With a smile, I told her I'd clean my mess after I finished eating then, and watched her look around at the pile of plates, pots, and pans that she and our other roommate had let pile up in their attempt to either bully me into cleaning their shit more often or prove some sort of point about me leaving everything a mess. They didn't bother me about cleaning up after myself for the last 2 months we lived together. Thanks for listening.